The first night I stayed on the farm, I felt it. The weight of the silence. It wasn't the kind of quiet you'd expect in the country. It wasn't peaceful or serene. No, this silence felt oppressive, like it was watching me, waiting for something I couldn't see. The air was thick with it. I had never felt more alone, not in any city or any crowded street. This was different. This was isolation, pure and simple. And I had never been more afraid of it. When I first found the place, I thought it would be an escape, a chance to breathe, to finally get away from the noise and chaos of the world. A little farm in the middle of nowhere, just me, the fields, and the sky. I had dreams of early mornings, tending to animals, working the land, getting my hands dirty, a simple life. But it didn't take long before I realized that the farm wasn't just quiet, it was dead quiet. And there's a difference between the two. Dead quiet, like the kind you'd hear in a graveyard, is the kind of silence that has its own pulse. Like something is waiting, watching. And that's exactly what it felt like. That first night, I thought I was just imagining things. Maybe it was the stress, the big move, the sudden change in my life. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, something in the air felt wrong. It wasn't just the silence. It was the way the darkness pressed in around the house. How the shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should have. How every little noise, the creak of the floorboards, the wind rustling through the trees, felt amplified, like it was happening just behind me, no matter where I was in the house. I tried to sleep. I really did. But that silence, it wasn't natural. It was like the whole world was holding its breath. Then, around midnight, I heard it. A whisper. It was faint at first, just a soft, rustling sound, like wind through the trees. But then it came again. Louder. Closer. And it wasn't the wind. It wasn't just the wind. The voice. It wasn't clear at first, but it had a sound to it, like someone calling my name from the other side of the room. My heart skipped. I turned quickly, half expecting to see someone standing there. But there was nothing. Only the dark, stretching farther into the corners of the room, and the whispers that still echoed in my ears. I didn't know what to think. Was it just my imagination? I told myself I was being stupid, but it wasn't just the whisper. It was the feeling of being watched. That sense that someone or something was right there with me. I could almost feel its presence pressing in on me, moving with me, around me. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the silence to return. But it didn't. The whispers kept coming, growing louder, clearer, almost as if they were trying to tell me something. "Help me," one of them seemed to say. "You shouldn't be here." That's when I knew something was wrong. The next morning, the sun was up, but the whispers hadn't stopped. They were quieter, but I could still hear them. Faint, lingering, like they were hiding just beneath the surface of everything. I shook it off, thinking I was just sleep-deprived. After all, I had moved to a remote farm, a place that would take some time to get used to. But that night, the whispers came back, stronger. I couldn't sleep. The fear in my chest was growing, settling deep into my bones, and no matter how I tried to ignore it, I couldn't escape the feeling that something was waiting for me, watching me. There were rules here on the farm, rules I was supposed to follow. The old man who owned the farm before me had made them clear. Never go outside after dark. Never go near the woods. Simple, right? And I was fine with that. I figured I could follow those rules without any problem. But I never asked why. I never asked what was out there, what was waiting. And now, as I lay there in the dark, the whispers grew louder, more urgent. They were calling me. "Come to us," they said. "You can't escape." I didn't know what to do.
The rules were simple. But now, with the whispers crawling through my thoughts, they felt like more than just precautions. They felt like warnings. Warnings about something dangerous, something I wasn't supposed to understand. So, I did what I thought was the only choice. I stayed inside. But the darkness didn't go away. And the whispers, they never stopped. In fact, they started to change, to twist. They didn't sound like wind anymore. They sounded like something much worse. Like someone or something was waiting for me to make a mistake.
The farm wasn't much to look at. Just an old house, a barn that looked like it could fall apart any day, and fields that stretched out into the horizon, empty except for the occasional scarecrow or rusty farm equipment. It was a place meant for hard work, simple living. But that wasn't the only reason I chose it. I needed to get away from everything. The city, the noise, the stress, it had all worn me down, and I thought a fresh start out here would help clear my head. Maybe I could find peace, or at least something close to it. Little did I know, peace was the last thing I would find. The farm sat miles from the nearest town, hidden deep within thick woods. The trees were so dense I barely saw the sky on the drive in. The road was narrow and winding, so overgrown in places it seemed like the forest was trying to swallow it whole. No one came out here unless they had to, and even then, they didn't stick around for long. That's what I'd gathered from the few locals I'd met. They were friendly enough, but there was always this unease in their eyes when they talked about the farm. "You'll be fine, just don't go in the woods after dark," one of them had said when I asked about the place. "Keep to the house after the sun goes down. That's the best advice I can give you." They didn't say why, and I didn't ask. I wasn't interested in their superstitions or whatever stories they were clinging to. After all, people always made up tales about remote places like this. The old farm had been in the family for years, passed down through generations. There were no real secrets here, right? I made my way up to the farmhouse that first day, ready to dive into my new life. The house smelled old, like wood and dust, and the air outside felt heavy with humidity. It was far from glamorous, but it was mine now. The field stretched out behind the house, waiting for me to get to work. I was ready for that at least. I didn't mind the idea of being alone. It was exactly what I needed. But the more I settled in, the more I started noticing things. Small things at first, creaking floors, the odd rustle of leaves when there was no wind, but things that, at the time, I shrugged off. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something watching me, something off. I started to learn more about the place as I spent my first few days there. Old family photos hung crookedly on the walls, showing generations of farmers with hard faces, sunburned and weathered from a lifetime of labor. I took the wander in the land, getting familiar with it. The barn was falling apart, and I had my work cut out for me. But there was something about the woods that always called to me. Even when I knew I shouldn't go near them, I found myself standing at the edge, looking out over the thick, dark trees. That's when I found out about the rules. The old farmhand who had worked the land before me, he'd been the last person to live there, left behind a small stack of handwritten notes. They weren't much, just simple instructions on caring for the place. But buried within the notes, there was a line that caught my attention. Never go in the woods after dark. Never. At first, I thought it was just a precaution. Maybe they were wild animals, or maybe he was just trying to keep the place running smoothly. But as I read further, I found a few more warnings, some more cryptic. Keep to the house after sundown. The land outside is not what it seems. Never disturb the forest. The old woods are not for man's eyes. The words felt strange, out of place in an otherwise practical set of instructions. Why was it so important not to go into the woods at night? It was like the farm was hiding something. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized there was something deeper beneath the surface.
Something the old farmhand hadn't written down, but that everyone seemed to know. I asked the local shopkeeper about it one afternoon when I ran into him while buying some supplies. He looked at me with this look, sort of knowing, and then he shook his head. "You gotta respect the woods," he said quietly, glancing around as if no one was listening. "People used to live here, work this farm, but they left after a while. Some didn't even last a full season. There's a reason the old man left those notes behind. I'd heed them if I were you." I couldn't get the thought out of my mind. What had happened to the people who lived here before? And why did everyone keep saying to stay away from the woods? The rules felt like a shackle, an invisible force that held me back from discovering the truth. But I didn't know the truth yet. All I knew was that I was alone, and that silence, that deep, unsettling silence, was always present, hanging over everything like a cloud. There was one more thing the farm had, something that was hard to ignore once I saw it: the well. It was located at the far end of the property, past the barn, surrounded by tall, twisted trees. The well had been there for as long as anyone can remember, but it wasn't like any well I'd ever seen. The stones were slick with moss, and the opening was narrow, almost too small to see down into. There was something about it that unnerved me. I couldn't place it, but every time I went near the well, I felt an odd, oppressive heaviness in my chest. I wanted to ignore it, but deep down, I knew the rules. Stay away from the well, stay away from the woods, stay inside at night. I didn't know it yet, but those rules were meant to protect me, to keep me safe from something that was already here, waiting.